Today's school students are known as Generation Z. And I recently heard a Generation Z t-shirt slogan which said, "When I am bored, I Google myself." Generation Z were born between 1995 and 2009. They currently make up 18% of our population, 9% of the workforce, but in a decade's time, they will be 31% of our workforce. Now, when they're talking about a library, they mean their playlist on iTunes. They speak and they write in a new language. If they can shorten it, they will. Their idea of an encyclopedia is one that they can change and contribute to. And whilst they're constantly reading, it's rarely going to be a book from cover to cover. After all, they're visual communicators, so why read it when you can watch it? They speak another language that sounds like, "My bad, totes, cron, chillax, epic for shiz, cray cray, YOLO." And these Generation Zs are going to spend an estimated 14,000 face-to-face contact hours in their 13 years of schooling and 3 years of a university degree. But they'll spend 6 times that, an estimated 84,000 hours as they enter the workforce. And so what will the future of work look like? Well, we're on the brink of significant intergenerational transition in our workplaces at the moment, as the baby boomers, who are currently making up a quarter of our workforce and hold a lot of the leadership roles, are reaching retirement years. And so as they're transitioning out of the workforce, they'll be just 8% of the workforce in 10 years' time. At the other end of the spectrum, as Generation Z are entering, things are going to change. I mean, they're the most materially endowed, technologically literate, formally educated, and globally connected generations to ever grace the planet. And so the way that they approach work, problem solving, collaboration, communication, innovation will be different as a result. Every generation will also have their own challenges and their own fears to overcome. In fact, Generation Z, a global and visual generation, you can communicate their top 3 fears simply in visual icons. Those being, the first being the poor Wi-Fi signal. I mean, it's quite a crisis for Generation Z if you can't be connected, but I think even a greater challenge for them is the buffering signal. I mean, this is a generation who haven't had to wait for anything. They didn't even have to live through dial-up. And I think the greatest concern is this, when the phone battery is out of charge. I mean, if you have no phone battery, life as you know it ceases to exist till you can find that power source. But Generation Z are growing up in a time of extraordinary, unprecedented change. And change is how they'll also approach their careers. At the moment in Australia, the average turnover rate is 15% per annum, which means people change jobs every 3 years and 4 months on average. Projected over the lifetime of a school leaver today, it's estimated that they'll have 17 jobs across 5 different careers in their lifetime. But what's the future of work going to look like? Well, the intergenerational report put out by the Australian government periodically looks at 3 big social trends that all start with P that are going to redefine what work looks like into the future. The first of these being our population. Now, Australia's population is growing. In fact, we have doubled both our national and our global population since 1966. We're not only growing, but we're also ageing. Our population pyramids depict this visually. In 1985, our population pyramid showed there were more younger people than older people. But today, we're starting to become more rectangular, and you can see we're on the brink of massive ageing. In fact, as we project to 2045, for the first time, our population pyramid is going to start to become inverted, with more people aged over 60 than under 18 for the first time in that year. But we don't just have more older people, we're also living for longer as well. And that ageing is going to have a ripple effect on all of us in our society. In fact, those ripples will also ripple out to even to the Queen. And if we can just take a moment just to consider the Queen for a moment. Please, it was 1952 that she ascended to the throne. And in that year, she would have had to write 40 congratulatory letters to Australians turning 100 that year. However, this year, she's needing to find time in her busy schedule to write 2,643. By the end of the decade, she'll be needing to write 4,885, and in 3 decades' time, she'll have to definitely employ the help of Prince Charles, Prince William, perhaps Prince George and Princess Charlotte to write an extraordinary 18,567 letters to Australians turning 100 that year. So we're growing, we're ageing, we're also changing. You see, 3/5 of our growth can be attributed to net overseas migration. So we're more culturally diverse than ever before. In fact, 1 in 4 Australians weren't born here. And when you look at households that have at least one parent born overseas, 46% of households have either one or both parents born overseas. We're incredibly culturally diverse, culturally rich, and that will be increasingly reflected in our workplace communities, as well as our increasing multi-generational community. We've currently got 6 generations in our communities: the builders, the baby boomers, Generation X, Generation Y, Generation Z, and the generation to follow them were born since 2010, the year marked by the electric car charging station, the launch of the iPad, the launch of Instagram, and the beginning of Generation Alpha. I heard a story of a mum talking to her Generation Alpha son and said, "Now, sweetie, Mum's been really sick this week. She's had a virus." And the little Gen Alpha said back to her, "Don't be silly, Mum. Only computers can get viruses." They're growing up in different times, and each generation will have different challenges and different needs. For example, we know Maslow's hierarchy of needs: the need for survival, security, our social needs, our self-esteem needs, and self-actualization. But Gen Z and Gen Alpha have identified a more fundamental need for that generation, which is the consistent and constant need for Wi-Fi wherever they go. We're growing, we're ageing, we're changing with our population. The other key shift is going to be the participation rate in the workforce. Now, the female participation rate will continue to increase and will actually be working later in life as well. That's exciting, isn't it? The retirement age is being pushed back. But even with those 2 increases, the overall participation rate is set to actually decline because we've currently got 65.1% of our population over 15 in the workforce, but by 2055 it will decline to 62.4%, and that's a result of our ageing population. You see, when we look at the ratios, you can see that in 1975 there were 15 people of working age for every couple of retirement age. Today, there's just 9 people of working age for every couple of retirement age, and as we project to 2055, there'll be just 5.4 people of traditional working age for every couple of retirement age. Now, that's going to place greater demands on the workforce for higher levels of productivity than we've ever seen before. And that's the third social trend, which is redefining the workplace of the future. Now, productivity is the only one there that's not defined by the demographic realities, but we're going to need to increase significantly. We've already seen an increase in productivity. In fact, for every hour an Australian works today, there are twice as many goods and services produced as there were in 1975. However, largely this has contributed to or been a result of the increased efficiencies that technology has enabled. It's amazing how we can find pretty much any piece of information or any answer within a few seconds, within a few clicks of a button. However, unless, of course, we want to do some deeper research, in which case this sums it up, that you know you're desperate for an answer when you look at the second page of Google. It's not just been technology, though, that's transformed our productivity, but we'll be able to maximise our productivity if we are people and organisations who can innovate, and also the communities that can collaborate. It's where we see the intersection of these 3 things, technology, innovation and collaboration, that we're seeing sectors being transformed. Let's take the accommodation sector, for example. Hilton, established in 1919 in 91 countries with approximately 600,000 beds. However, compare that to Airbnb, established in 2008, is in 190 countries and has over 1.5 million listings. Now, what Airbnb has done is an innovative approach to accommodation, which has released the collaborative power of the community for all of us to become accommodation providers if we want to, and it has leveraged this over a technology platform. Again, you see this with the transportation network company Uber. Suddenly, we can all become drivers. So this innovative idea of transportation has been released through to the collaborative power of the community through the technology platforms. Cancer Research UK. They are a very innovative company that have made a game called Play to Cure, Genes in Space. It's a computer game, and as you play it, you are processing significant amounts of genetic data, which would otherwise take scientists hours of work to process. And so this innovative idea, released to a broad collaborative community over a technology platform, has transformed this approach to beating the problem of solving cancer sooner. What makes TED such a powerful brand? Well, at its core, it's innovation in communication and the spreading of ideas. But it's also released over to the collaborative community to take part in. the model of TEDx events with local communities being able to take part. And then it's maximised through the communication over the technology platforms. Traditional leadership styles have been based on linearity and conformity, based on position and hierarchy. However, the leadership styles that the younger generations are responding more to are those based on collaboration and contribution, where they can participate and have a voice. And if we think about the effective leaders of the future, they will not be those marked necessarily by having the highest developed skill level or expertise in an area, but rather those who are able to create a culture of collaborative innovation. These leaders will understand that as people, we are designed to connect. And we are constantly connecting over online platforms. But what also amazes me, in a world where we've got all the technologies to enable us to telework full-time if we wanted to, we still spend hours commuting to and from work every day and every week. And that's because something happens when we connect in face-to-face interaction, and ideas are sparked and knowledge is transferred in a way that only happens in that context. We're also designed to contribute. And it's interesting that the platforms that we spend the most time on online are actually those where we're not just consumers of the content, but also contributors. It's the social media platforms. It's places like blogs and even Wikipedia where we're contributors. And finally, this culture will also be one that enables us to create. We're designed to create. And again, you see this on what we're doing online, where an example is YouTube, where we create the content. Now, did you know there are 100 hours of YouTube videos uploaded every single minute? It equates to 115 years of content being uploaded every single week. We're designed to create. What does a workplace culture of collaborative innovation look like? Well, it's inclusive of a multi-generational, multicultural, multi-skilled community. And it draws on the strength of this diversity, and it builds on a shared foundation of shared values such as humility, respect, and authenticity. Productivity and outcomes, output, are important. In fact, we've seen that will become increasingly so. But perhaps, as we shift our focus from just process to developing people, from just outcomes to creating space for opportunity and innovation, from transactional to transformational leadership, and create vibrant, dynamic, healthy workplace communities, then outcomes and productivity will be higher than ever as people are invested and as they find that they invest the 84,000 hours of their work life in a rewarding way, in a thriving culture of collaborative innovation. Thank you very much.